The blade came down hard enough to split the training post in two, and every man in the yard of Galdron Hold took a step back. Jasper Quinn did not step back. He stood with his borrowed axe loose in his grip, sawdust settling across his worn boots, and watched the green-skinned woman yank her weapon free from the ruined stump with the casual ease of someone pulling a knife from soft bread. She turned and looked at him, not at the post. At him, specifically, with a measuring flatness in her amber eyes that made the back of his neck prickle. He had arrived at Galdron Hold 3 weeks ago under the name Jasper Cole, which was not entirely a lie. Cole had been his mother's name, and he had shed Quinn the way a man sheds a coat that no longer fits, or a coat that has blood on it he cannot wash out. The hold was a highland settlement above a deep fjord, a cluster of long timber longhouses pressed against a granite cliff face, with the smell of salt water always riding up through the pines below. The Thane of Galdron was a broad, red-bearded man named Aldrich who had needed an extra blade hand for the coming winter, when the roads above the Snowling got dangerous, and the hold's herds needed protecting from both the weather and things that moved in the weather. Jasper had shown up with a good sword, a quiet manner, and nothing that identified him as the disgraced knight of Venholt who had walked out of a lord's court 2 years ago under accusations that still made his jaw tight when he thought about them. He did not think about them now. He was thinking about the woman across the yard. She was the most physically striking person he had seen since he had left the South, and he had been telling himself since yesterday, when she arrived with her warband at the hold's gate, that he needed to stop thinking about her in those terms because they were professional terms, and this was a professional situation. Her name was Shagrol Gorehorn, and she led a patrol band of 8 orcs who had been hired by Thane Aldrich through a trading agreement with the Highland clans to the north. She wore fitted warrior's leathers, a dark, close-cut tunic of tanned hide laced up the sides over a storm-gray undershirt, close-fitting leather trousers tucked into tall boots reinforced at the knee, and a belt of braided leather hung with a short-handled axe on one hip and a knife long enough to be a short sword on the other. The leathers were not decorative. They were worn, scuffed at the shoulder where a shield strap would rest, and they fit her with the kind of specificity that comes from years of adjustment and use. Her long dark hair was pulled back in a thick braid hung with 2 iron rings. Her tusks, the lower ones that curved up from her jaw, were smooth and undamaged, which told Jasper she was skilled enough to have kept her face out of harm's reach for a long time. She was, in a word that he pushed aside irritably, extraordinary. She had not spoken to him yet. She had spoken to Thane Aldrich for the better part of yesterday evening, negotiating terms in the lowland trade tongue that most of the hold's men barely followed. She had spoken to her own people in the northern orc dialect, short clipped sounds that carried authority without volume. She had assessed every man in the yard this morning with that same flat measuring look she was currently giving Jasper, and apparently she had found all of them wanting, because she had walked to the training post and demonstrated exactly what she expected from the people she would be working alongside by reducing it to splinters. Jasper tossed the axe from one hand to the other. It was a habit when he was thinking, and he was aware it looked theatrical, but it also helped him read the balance of an unfamiliar weapon. The axe was Galdron-made, shorter than he preferred, heavier in the head. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Her amber eyes tracked the axe. "You are the southerner," she said. Her voice was low and even, carrying the slight burr that most orc speakers of the trade tongue carried, a sound like stone grinding against stone that somehow came out musical. "The one they call Cole." "That is what they call me," Jasper said. She looked at him for another moment. "You hold that axe like someone who is used to a sword. I am better with a sword." "Then why are you holding an axe?" "Because it is what was available this morning." Something shifted in her expression. Not a smile exactly, more like the acknowledgement of a point. She crossed the yard without hurry and stopped in front of him, close enough that he could see the amber shade of her eyes had a faint inner ring of gold near the pupil. She was taller than him by perhaps 2 inches, which placed her well above the height of any man in the yard, and she stood with the complete physical ease of someone who had never in her life needed to make herself smaller. "I am Shagrol Gorehorn," she said. "My band will be working the northern road patrols with your group. If we are to keep each other alive through the snow season, I need to know what you can actually do." "Put a sword in my hand and I will show you," Jasper said. She looked at him, and this time something in her expression did shift, something warmer and more complicated that she controlled almost before it happened. "We begin at first light tomorrow," she said, and turned and walked away. The men of Galdron Hold watched her go and then looked at Jasper with expressions ranging from impressed to unsettled. Dag, the Hold's senior blade hand, a bearded veteran of about 40 who had taken Jasper under mild patronage since his arrival, came to stand beside him. "You are either brave or stupid," Dag said, with the tone of a man genuinely uncertain which. "Probably both," Jasper said, and went to find a sword. The patrols began the following morning in a gray pre-dawn that tasted of incoming snow. The northern road above Galdron wound along the fjord's eastern rim, wide enough for a wagon in summer and barely passable in deep winter, cutting through pine forests so dense that the light arrived in thin columns even at midday. Things moved in those forests. Not always dangerous things, but things that required watching, and the Hold's cattle were moved along this road between highland and lowland pasture, twice a year in a transit that the Thane could not afford to lose. Shagrol ran her patrols like a commander who had done this for a very long time, which she had. She positioned her people with a field tactician's eye, kept communications brief, and wasted no movement. Jasper, assigned to the rearguard position alongside an orc named Breck and a Galdron man named Edvin, spent the first 2 days learning her system by watching how her signals propagated through the group and imitating Breck's responses to them. On the third day, coming around a blind curve in the road where the cliff face pushed the path to the fjord's edge, they found the tree across the trail. It was not a fallen tree. It was a cut tree, the stump still pale and fresh, and it was blocking the road in the only place where the cliff and the drop gave no room to go around. Jasper saw at the same moment Shagrol raised her fist in the halt signal, and he was already turning to check the rearguard when the arrows started coming from the pine ridge above. There were 6 of them, human bandits by the sound of their shouts, working the high ground with short bows and trying to push the group onto the narrow fjord edge where footing was bad. It was a competent plan for waylaying a merchant convoy. It was a significantly less competent plan for waylaying 8 orc warriors and 2 experienced human blade hands. Shagrol did not shout orders. She made 2 hand signals, and her people moved like water finding channels, scattering to the cliff base cover and angling for the ridge approach, while keeping the bandits' attention by presenting moving targets. Jasper took the left flank path without being told, because it was the obvious move from his position, and he could see the angle she was working, and when he came up through the pines at a running crouch, he found 2 of the archers already turning to deal with the orc warrior coming up their right, which meant their backs were to Jasper. He took them both down without killing them, which required more precision than killing and accordingly more skill, using the flat of his borrowed sword and the weight of his shoulder at the right moment. He was breathing hard when Shagrol appeared beside him on the ridge, her axe clean in her hand, the situation already resolved below. She looked at the 2 men on the ground, neither of them dead, and then at Jasper. "You did not kill them," she said. "I did not need to." She was quiet for a moment. The wind came hard off the fjord below, carrying that saltwater smell even this high. Her dark braids swung against her shoulder. "Most men in your position would have." "I know." She looked at him for a long moment with that amber gaze, and there was something in it that was different from the measuring assessment of the training yard. This was less professional, less controlled. She pulled her eyes away and gestured to her warriors below, signaling for the prisoners to be bound and the road to be cleared. That night at the patrol camp, a small fire sheltered in a stone circle at the road's widest point. Shagrol sat across from Jasper and did not quite look at him while she was also, very clearly, looking at him. He was aware of it with a specificity that was not comfortable, like sitting too close to a fire on cold skin. "You know tactics," she said after a while. "Not brawling tactics, actual field tactics." "I have had some training," Jasper said. "What kind of training?" He turned the question over. He was getting better at deflecting it, but she was harder to deflect than most people. "Military, some years ago." She accepted this without pressing it, which surprised him. "You use a sword like someone who was trained young," she said instead. "The muscle memory is too deep for adult learning. You started as a boy." "I did. Page training." "Squire training." He met her eyes across the fire. "Something like that." She held his gaze for a beat, and then something crossed her face that was almost amusement. "Somewhere south of here someone is missing a knight," she said, and went back to sharpening her knife. Jasper's chest tightened. He waited for the follow-up question, the pressure, the shift in her expression toward calculation. It did not come. She just sharpened her knife and left the observation there between them like a stone, making no move to use it. He did not know what to do with that, so he watched the fire, and was aware of her warmth at 8 feet's distance more acutely than he was aware of the fire's warmth at 4. The snow came down in earnest the second week of the patrol rotation, and the Hold's longhouses became a shared space in the way that only real cold creates. Everyone too close together, too aware of each other, the hierarchy of the outdoors replaced by the flatter social order of warmth and firelight. Shagrol's band had their own section of the largest longhouse, separated by a low timber partition from the Galdron men's quarters, but the common hall between them saw everyone together for meals and the grinding evenings when the weather made outdoor movement pointless. Jasper ate at the common table. Shagrol's warriors ate there too, mostly in their own cluster, with the slight separateness that was equal parts habit and the awareness of Galdron men who still watched them with the flattened wariness that marked the older prejudice between their kinds. It was not violent hostility here. Thane Aldrich had beaten that out of his hold before the contract was ever signed, but it was a low-grade discomfort that manifested in averted eyes and conversations that stopped half a beat too early. Jasper sat down at the end of the bench nearest to Shagrol's cluster one evening in the second week, not because he had planned to, but because the rest of the bench was full and the space was open, and he was too tired from the day's patrol to calculate anything more complicated. Shagrol was at the far end of the cluster, eating and listening to Breck tell a story in the northern dialect that was apparently funny because 2 of the others laughed at the end of it. She glanced at him when he sat down. He glanced back. Neither of them said anything, and somehow that was more comfortable than conversation would have been. Breck, a shorter, broader orc with a scar bisecting one eyebrow, leaned forward and addressed Jasper in heavily accented trade tongue. "You fight well for a southern man." "Thank you," Jasper said. "Shagrol thinks so too." Breck said this with the satisfied innocence of someone causing minor social chaos on purpose. Several of the orc warriors developed sudden intense interest in their food. Shagrol said something in the northern dialect that made Breck immediately revise his expression toward caution. Then she looked at Jasper and said in trade tongue, "Do not listen to Breck. He talks more than he thinks." "I do not know," Jasper said. "I thought it was interesting information." Her amber eyes held his, and this time she did not quite control the corner of her mouth, which moved very slightly in a direction that was unmistakably a real smile. It happened fast and she shut it down fast, but he had seen it, and knowing that she knew that he had seen it produced a warmth in his sternum that was separate from the longhouse fire entirely. The debt that would not stay buried arrived on foot, through the snow, in the form of a man named Crestwick. He was a lord's courier, compact and purposeful, wearing the livery of Lord Heron Venholt under a heavy travel cloak, and he arrived at Galdron Hold's gate on a gray afternoon 12 days into the snow season with 2 guards and a letter sealed in black wax. Jasper was returning from the outer stockade when he saw the livery, and felt his entire body go cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. He stepped back behind the storehouse wall and stood there for a moment that was perhaps the least proud of his adult life, breathing carefully and reminding himself that he had done nothing wrong. The problem was not guilt. The problem was that Lord Harren Venholt did not see it that way, and Lord Harren Venholt's version of events was the one that had been written down. The accusation had been embezzlement of campaign funds during the border skirmishes 2 years ago. The actual situation had been considerably more complicated, involving a quartermaster who had needed someone to blame, a lord who had needed a clean record, and a knight of modest connections and no powerful family who had been the most convenient available target. Jasper had not stood trial. He had instead taken a horse and ridden north until the horse needed rest, and then he had walked, and then eventually he had arrived at places where his name meant nothing. He watched the courier cross the yard and enter the Thane's hall, and then he turned and found Shagrol Gorehorn standing 3 feet behind him. He had not heard her. She moved like weather. She was looking at the courier's livery, the retreating blue and gold, and then she looked at Jasper, and her amber eyes did what they always did, which was read him with a precision he found simultaneously alarming and in some complicated way he did not want to examine, a relief. "You know those colors," she said, quiet. Not an accusation. "Yes, that is a problem for you," he exhaled slowly. "It may be." She was quiet for a moment, standing beside him in the shadow of the storehouse. The snow fell soft and constant, muffling everything. She had her axe at her hip and her arms loose at her sides, and she was watching him with an expression he had not seen from her before. It was not the measuring assessment. It was something more direct than that and less guarded, and he did not know what to do with it. "What did they say you did?" she asked. Again, not accusatory. Information gathering, he told her. Briefly, flatly, the facts without the emotion he had long since buried because emotion about it cost him more than it was worth. She listened without interruption, which was one of the things he had come to realize about her. She listened completely, the way very few people did. When he finished, she said, "Did you do it?" "No," she nodded once. "Then you have a problem with a lord, not with truth." She paused. "That is a different kind of problem, manageable." He looked at her. Something in him was aware that this was not a reaction he had expected from anyone, and that this specifically was the reason he had been living under a false name in the north instead of trying to clear his name anywhere. Because everyone he had ever tried to explain it to had either not believed him or had not cared enough to help him. And here was this woman, who owed him nothing, who had known him for less than 2 weeks, simply categorizing it as manageable. "You are not asking me if I am certain," he said. "You told me you did not do it," she said. "I believe you. If I am wrong about that, then I am wrong. I am not wrong often." She said it without pride or softness, just as a fact, and then she looked back toward the Thane's hall. "Go in through the longhouse. Tell Aldrich through Dag that you need to speak with him before he answers the courier. Aldrich owes you goodwill from the bandit problem. Use it." Jasper stood for a moment in the snow, looking at her. Something in his chest was doing something uncomfortable, and he was choosing not to identify it because there were more urgent matters. "Why are you helping me?" he said. She looked at him directly, and her amber eyes were very steady, and the gold ring near the pupil was very bright in the flat winter light, and she said, "Because someone should." Then she turned and walked back toward the longhouse, and left him standing in the snow. He spoke to Aldrich through Dag, and Aldrich, who was a pragmatic man and who valued the competence Jasper had demonstrated over the past weeks considerably more than he valued a southern lord's letter, told the courier that he had no man by the name of Jasper Quinn in his employ, and that the courier was welcome to look around before he left in the morning, which the courier did, and which proved nothing because Jasper spent that night and the following morning in the patrol route section of the northern road that was outside the hold's immediate perimeter. It was a thin solution. It would not hold if the Lord pressed it, but it bought time, and time was what Jasper needed to think. He came back to the hold in the early afternoon after the courier's departure to find that Shagrol had left him a piece of flatbread and a portion of the morning's porridge set aside at his place in the longhouse, covered with a cloth, in the manner of someone who had not wanted to be obvious about it. He sat down and ate it, and the warmth of the gesture was entirely disproportionate to the gesture itself, which was just food, and he knew that, and he also could not fully talk himself out of the feeling. That evening, Breck found reasons to be elsewhere, and the partitioned section of the longhouse that held Shagrol's corner of the space was quiet when Jasper came through the common hall and paused at the partition's edge. She was sitting with her back against the wall, a small oil lamp at her knee, working a new lacing into the shoulder of her leather tunic where the stitching had pulled. Her hands were deft and practical and entirely at odds with the size of them, and she did not look up when he stopped, but she said, "You can sit." He sat, cross-legged on the rush-covered floor a few feet away. The lamplight was warm and low, and the rest of the longhouse was noise without words at this distance. "The courier is gone?" she asked. "Yes. For now," she said, which was accurate. "For now," he agreed. He watched her hands work the lacing. "I need to eventually deal with this properly, not hide from it." "Yes. The problem is that the person who could clear me is the quartermaster who blamed me, and he has no reason to revise his account." She looked up from the lacing. "Who does the Lord care about more, punishing you or finding the money?" Jasper blinked. He had not thought about it from that angle. He had been thinking about exoneration as a matter of testimony when it was actually, given the Lord's personality, a matter of gold. "The money," he said slowly. "He cared about the money more than about me. I was an afterthought to get the books to balance. Then the quartermaster, if he can be shown to have the money, becomes the more interesting target," Shagrol said, and went back to her lacing. Jasper sat with this for a long moment. "You think strategically," he said, "not like a soldier." "Like a commander." She did not respond to this for a moment. Then she set down the tunic and the lacing needle and looked at him with an expression that was, for the first time, genuinely unguarded, and he was aware that it cost her something to look like that because she was a woman who wore her guard the way she wore her leathers, close and functional. "My people call what I do Naksharath," she said. "There is no clean trade-tongue word. It means roughly seeing the whole field before the first step." She paused. "My mother taught it to me. She said it was the difference between surviving a battle and winning before the battle starts." "She sounds formidable," Jasper said. Something passed across Shagrol's face, quick and controlled but not quite hidden. "She was," she said, and the past tense landed with a weight that he recognized and did not push at. He said, "I am sorry." She looked at him and he thought she was going to close it off, close back down into the professional evenness she managed most of the time. Instead she said, "How long has it been since you had someone to talk to? Genuinely talk to?" The question caught him sideways. He thought about it honestly rather than deflecting. "A long time," he said. She nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, "me also." They sat in the lamplight with the noise of the longhouse all around them and the wind coming hard off the fjord outside, and it was the most at home Jasper had felt anywhere in 2 years. The contest happened because of a barrel of ale and Dag's mouth, which was a combination that historically produced bad outcomes at Galdron Hold and would continue to do so until the hold fell into the fjord from old age. It was the deep midwinter, and the hold's men had been cooped up for 6 days by a snowstorm of genuine ferocity, and the ale was flowing at the long table in the common hall, and Dag, who was a good man in most respects but competitive in a way that bypassed his better judgment, said, loudly enough to carry to Shagrol's end of the table, that while the orc warriors were formidable, he would wager that no single one of them could best Jasper Cole in a wrestling bout, because Cole was the best grappler in the hold and had been so since his first week. This was, as far as it went, accurate. Jasper was a good grappler. He was also immediately aware, from the quality of silence that fell over the orc end of the table, that Dag had just said something that was going to have consequences. Shagrol set down her cup, Her amber eyes moved to Dag with a patience that was somehow more alarming than anger. Then they moved to Jasper. "Is this a challenge from you," she asked, "or from your man?" "From Dag," Jasper said immediately. Dag, to his credit, did not back down. "From both, if Cole agrees." Jasper looked at Shagrol. She was looking at him with an expression that was balanced between professional appraisal and something that, in the warm light of the common hall, looked very much like anticipation. "I'm not going to apologize for what Dag said," Jasper said, "because I am not the one who said it, but I will meet the challenge if you want to settle it." Shagrol stood. She was almost a head taller than Dag and a solid 2 inches taller than Jasper, and the longhouse firelight caught the bronze tones in her dark hair and the amber of her eyes, and there was something in the way she stood, not threatening, but present in a way that was simply unavoidable. That made the common hall go very quiet. "Tomorrow morning," she said, "the yard I do not fight drunk," Dag spluttered. "I did not say you have been drinking," she said without heat. "So have I tomorrow." She sat back down. The common hall exhaled. Breck, who had been watching with the expression of someone restraining considerable entertainment, found Jasper's gaze and made an expression that communicated something like, "This will be memorable," in a language that transcended species. Jasper went back to his cup and thought, very firmly, about tactics, and not about the way the firelight had caught the line of her jaw when she stood, which was not relevant information. The morning was iron gray, the storm blown out but the cold left in its wake like a lodger who would not leave. The hold's yard was packed down to hard-crusted snow, and the whole of Galdrun, every man not on watch, had found reasons to be present when Shagrol Gorehorn and Jasper Cole walked out from opposite ends of the longhouse. She had her coat off and her laced leather tunic over her warrior's shirt, her braid over one shoulder, her expression completely even. He came out in his wool shirt with his sleeves rolled and his sword left inside. Because this was a grappling bout, an edged steel would only confuse the issue. They stood in the center of the yard and she looked at him with those amber eyes, and he thought, not for the first time, that being looked at by her was like being assessed by something that saw further through people than people were usually comfortable with. "Rules," she said. "First one fully grounded and held for a count of 10 loses." "Agreed," he said. "No eye gouging, no biting." She paused, and the corner of her mouth moved in that contained almost smile. "No dirty work." "Agreed," he said again. And then, because he was tired of being careful around things he meant, he said, "You are going to be very difficult to ground." "Yes," she said simply. "I am." He smiled at her. He felt it happen and did not stop it, and her expression shifted in response, something warming through the professional evenness, and for a moment they were just two people grinning at each other in a snowy yard before a fight, and it was easy. Natural in a way that very little had been natural for Jasper in a long time. Then she came at him, and it stopped being easy. She was not faster than him exactly, but she read his movements with an almost uncanny accuracy that told him she had grappled with people who knew what they were doing, not just muscled through brawls. He managed to break 3 of her initial grip attempts and land one of his own that should have worked and did not because she adjusted her center of gravity in a way that required both their weights to be significantly different than they were. He went down once, rolled free before the count, came back up covered in hard snow crystals, and with his shoulder ringing where she had levered it. She went down twice, both times because he had gotten below her center, which was his only consistent tactical advantage, and both times she shed the holds with a technical precision that drew appreciative sounds from the watching men. The bout lasted nearly 10 minutes, which was a long time for serious grappling, and it ended when they came together in a clinch that neither of them could resolve, because his legs had found something workable but her arms had found something equally workable, and they stood there locked, both breathing hard, faces very close. He could feel the warmth coming off her in the cold air. He could see the exertion bright in her amber eyes and something else in them too, something present and alive and looking directly at him. "Draw," he said, when breathing became possible again. Draw, she agreed, and they stepped apart. The hold's yard made noise. Even the orc warriors made noise. Dag, who had started this, looked partly vindicated and partly like a man who had been watching something slightly more charged than a wrestling bout, and was uncertain how to categorize it. Shagrol met Jasper's eyes across the yard for a beat that lasted longer than the moment required, and then she turned and walked back inside to find her coat. Breck appeared at Jasper's elbow. "You know," Breck said in the tone of someone announcing weather, "that is the first time anyone has held a bout with her past 5 minutes since I have known her." "How long have you known her?" Jasper asked. 11 years, Breck said and walked away. In the deep cold of midwinter, things happened between them in the way that slow rivers eventually reach the sea, not with drama but with inevitability, each small movement feeding the next until the momentum was its own fact. She started sitting beside him in the evenings rather than across from him, the warmth of her shoulder available and acknowledged through the small decisions people make about proximity. He started leaving the last of the good fireside spots for her when she came in late from the outer watch, which was a small thing, and she received it as a small thing, and neither of them made it into a conversation. He showed her the shorthand military notation he used to track patrol patterns, which was a more efficient system than the Hold's standard records, and she studied it with the focused intensity she brought to anything tactical, and within 3 days was using it more effectively than he did. She started teaching him the spoken signals her band used on patrol, the clipped northern dialect sounds that carried no further than intended in open terrain. And he was a poor student of language in general but a good student of systems. So he learned the logic of them rather than the sounds themselves, and she said approvingly that this was the right approach. It was Breck who eventually said, with the bluntness of a man whose patience for indirection had fully expired, "Are you two just going to keep doing this until spring?" They were at the patrol camp, the fire in its stone circle, the pines black-edged against a sky that had cleared enough to show stars. Breck directed this at both of them with the democratic fairness of someone who blamed both parties equally, which was accurate. Shagrol said something in the northern dialect that made Breck close his mouth. Jasper said nothing, because everything he thought to say was either too little or too much. That night, when the camp was quiet and the watch had rotated and the fire had burned to low red coals, he sat awake because he was not good at sleeping in unfamiliar cold, and he was aware of her awake 4 feet away because she breathed differently when she was awake, a thing he knew now in the way that you know things about people you have been paying close attention to for weeks. "Jasper," she said quietly in the dark. He had not told her his real name. He had told no one here his real name. She was using the name he had given, Cole, and had been using it from the beginning, and hearing her say a different name, his name, the one he had put away, made him go very still. She rolled toward him in the dark. He could see her by the coal's light, the outline of her, the amber of her eyes open and steady. "That is your name," she said, not a question. "Yes." "Jasper," she said again, and the word in her mouth sounded like something reclaimed rather than something discovered, like she was simply putting a thing back where it belonged. He said, "How long have you known?" "Since the 2nd week. You write your initial on your equipment checks. The J for Cole does not fit the same hand as the J on your sword hilt." She paused. "Also, you respond to it faster than to Cole." He exhaled. There was something so wholly characteristic about her in this that he felt the tightness in his chest ease rather than tighten. She had known and she had kept it, held it carefully without using it against him, and this was, he understood, what she was like, not just strategically competent but genuinely careful with the things that mattered. "You kept it," he said. "It was yours to keep or give," she said. "Not mine." He lay in the dark listening to the fire and the pines, and thought about what it felt like to be seen by someone who was careful with what they saw. It was not something he had encountered in a long time. It was not something, he realized, he had been certain still existed. "Shagrol," he said. "Yes. Thank you for the courier, for all of it. A pause. "You would do the same." "I would," he said. "I would." In the dark, close enough to feel the warmth of her, they were quiet together, and it was the best night's rest Jasper Quinn had in 2 years, though he did not technically sleep more than he had before. The revelation happened at the midwinter assembly, and it changed everything in the span of about 3 minutes. Thane Aldrich held the assembly in the great longhouse once a year. When the representative of the highland clans came down from the northern passes to confirm trading agreements and resolve disputes. It was partly ceremonial, partly deeply practical, and this year it was the first time the Galdrun Hold had received such a representative under the new contract with the Orc patrol bands. Aldrich had been nervous about it for a week in the understated way of men who were rarely nervous, and Jasper had noted this without fully understanding why the visit warranted more anxiety than the usual interclan negotiations. He understood it when the representative arrived. She came with 12 warriors and a standard-bearer, and the standard was a thing Jasper had not seen before. A black iron circle hung with 5 braided cords, each a different color, which he learned from Dag, was the mark of the Gorehorn clan seat, the governing bloodline of the northern Highland Orc territories. The representative herself was an older woman, broad and commanding, with gray at her temples, and the same amber eyes that Jasper had spent approximately too many hours recently looking into. Shagrol Gorehorn, who had been standing quietly at the assembly hall's edge in a position that could charitably be called inconspicuous, went completely still. The older woman looked across the hall and found her, and her expression went through several things rapidly: relief, fury, love, and something Jasper could not name. Dag leaned close to Jasper and said, in a whisper that conveyed his own dawning realization, "That is Matriarch Varek-al Gorehorn. That is the clan seat matriarch of the Northern Highlands." "That is Shagrol's mother," Jasper said, because he had heard the past tense weight in Shagrol's voice when she said the word, months ago by the oil lamp, and it had clearly been wrong. The mother was not dead. The mother was here, and alive, and the clan standard-bearer of the most significant Orc political seat in the Northern Highland territories, which meant that Shagrol Gorehorn, patrol band commander, grappling draw, woman who sat beside him in the evenings and knew his name before he gave it to her, was not simply a senior warrior commander. She was the clan seat heir. The great longhouse had gone the kind of quiet that precedes significant events, because the Galdrun men were reading the situation the way experienced men read situations, and the Orc warriors who had not been Shagrol's band were reading it with the added context of actually knowing what they were looking at. Matriarch Varek-al crossed the hall. She did not hurry and she did not deviate, and every person in her path moved. She stopped in front of Shagrol with the specific energy of a woman who has been in a long argument for several months and has simply arrived to finish it. She spoke in the northern dialect, and Jasper could not follow it, but he could read the structure. The matriarch's clipped authority, Shagrol's controlled, level response. The way neither of them was backing down from anything, but both of them were also clearly not indifferent to each other. Breck materialized beside Jasper. He looked at the floor, then at the ceiling, then at Jasper with an expression of someone who has known an important thing for a long time and is only now reckoning with the moment of disclosure. "She did not tell you," Breck said. "It was not quite a question." "No," Jasper said. "She has been trying to not be the heir for about 2 years, Breck said. Since Matriarch Varek-al declared her the seat successor, he stopped. She left. Took her contract warriors and left the clan hold and came south to work patrol routes, to be Shagrol Gorehorn the warrior and not Shagrol of the clan seat." Jasper stood with this. He was looking at Shagrol's back, her braid and her leather-clad shoulders, the rigid line of her that told him she was managing considerable internal effort. The matriarch said something that was clearly a direct command, and Shagrol turned, and her amber eyes found Jasper across the hall with an expression he had not seen on her face before. It was the first time, in all the months he had known her, that she looked uncertain. He held her gaze. He did not look away. He did not know what he was communicating, but he meant all of it. Shagrol turned back to her mother and said something that had the structure of, "Not yet," or "I am not finished here," or "Give me time." The matriarch looked at her for a long moment, and then looked across the hall at Jasper with an appraising amber gaze that was entirely her daughter's. And Jasper had the sudden and clear understanding that he was being evaluated by a clan matriarch, and that the evaluation was significantly more consequential than a wrestling bout. He straightened. He met the matriarch's eyes with the steadiness he had spent years cultivating, the bearing of someone who knew exactly who he was even when he was using someone else's name. Matriarch Vorka looked at him for about 10 seconds. Then she said something to Shagrol that made Shagrol's shoulders lose about half their rigidity. Then the matriarch swept past and went to begin her formal greetings with Thane Aldrich, and the assembly hall exhaled collectively. Shagrol came to him. She moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who had been raised to move through formal gatherings, which was a thing she had not moved through anything like before, and it was a different quality of movement, and he was seeing her in layers, each one real. She stopped in front of him. Her expression had settled back toward its usual evenness, but the edges of it were rough. "You did not tell me," he said, "not an accusation, fact." "No," she said. "Why?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Because everyone who knows treats me differently," she said. "Either like something to use or something to manage." She stopped. "You wanted to be just Shagrol," he said. "Yes," she said, quietly. "With you, particularly." Something in his chest turned over slowly like a stone at the bottom of a river that has been waiting for the current to be strong enough. He said, "I am not going to treat you differently." "I know," she said. "That is why I am telling you now, instead of running out of the building." He looked at her and she was looking at him, and the great longhouse was full of people around them, and the midwinter assembly was formally beginning at the head table, and none of it was the part of the moment that mattered. "Is that all you were keeping?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I was keeping my name," he said. "You kept something considerably larger." The corner of her mouth moved. "I have been informed that I am dramatic," she said. And this time she let the smile come through, which was a rare and specific thing, and it did something to him that he was choosing not to quantify because they were standing in a room full of people. The conversation with Matriarch Vorka happened 2 days later, in the smaller meeting room adjacent to the great longhouse that Thane Aldrich had given over for the clan seat's private use during the assembly period. Jasper had not exactly been summoned. He had been informed by Breck that the matriarch had expressed interest in speaking with him, which was a difference without a meaningful distinction. He went because the alternative was avoiding a clan matriarch, which was a significantly worse tactical position. Vorka received him alone, which was either a courtesy or a test or both, sitting at the room's small table with the same comfortable physical authority as her daughter in a chair that seemed to fit her rather than contain her. Her amber eyes assessed him without preamble. "My daughter," she said, in trade tongue that was precise and slightly accented, "left the clan seat 2 years ago because she did not want to be managed. She has spent those 2 years being entirely unmanaged on patrol roads in the highlands. This has apparently included getting into grappling bouts with southern men." She paused. "And losing." "It was a draw," Jasper said. She said the same, Vorka said, and something in her expression shifted toward approval that she did not bother to hide. "I am told you are a disgraced knight living under a false name." He had expected this. He had a response prepared, the measured version, the one that presented the facts cleanly. What came out instead was, "Yes, I am." Vorka nodded. "I am told the charge is embezzlement of military funds. I am told you deny it." "I do." "She believes you." "I know." "I have found," Vorka said slowly, "that my daughter's judgment about people is very rarely wrong. She has something I can only describe as a capacity for seeing what people actually are rather than what they are presenting." She looked at him with those amber eyes. "She is presenting you with considerable care, Jasper Quinn. In my experience, she does not do that with anyone." Jasper said nothing because everything he might say was either too much or insufficient. She will have to return to the clan seat, Vorka said. The succession must be confirmed before the next cycle of the clan assembly, which is in the late spring. That is a fixed obligation. She knows this. What does she want to do about it? Jasper asked. Vorka looked at him steadily. You should ask her, she said, but I will tell you what I observe. I observe that she has been a warrior and a commander for a long time, and I observe that she is very good at it, and I observe that she has never, in all the years I have watched, looked at anyone the way she looks at you. She paused. The clan seat heir may choose her own partner. That is old clan law. Whatever she chooses, I will not oppose it. Another pause. But the clan seat needs its heir. I understand, Jasper said. I wonder, Vorka said thoughtfully, whether a man who has been managing his own false exile for 2 years might not find a way to resolve his standing with a southern lord, given sufficient motivation. She said it lightly, conversationally, and then stood and ended the meeting with the economy of someone who has made their point and does not need to repeat it. Jasper walked out into the corridor and stood for a moment with the cold stone wall at his back and thought about the word motivation, and what exactly it was shaping into, and what he intended to do about it. He found Shagrol on the fjord side wall, where the hold's outer rampart looked directly down the cliff face to the dark water below. She was standing with her arms resting on the stone, looking out at the gray-white expanse of the fjord in the winter light, and she heard him coming because she always heard him coming. She talked to you, Shagrol said. She did. What did she say? A number of things. He came to stand beside her at the wall, close enough that their arms nearly touched on the cold stone. She said you need to go back. I know I need to go back, Shagrol said to the fjord. I have always known. She stopped. I was not ready. What changed that? She turned her head and looked at him, and the wind off the fjord was strong and cold, and it moved her braid, and she made no move to control it, and her amber eyes were very direct. You know what changed it, she said. He said her name, just her name, Shagrol, and the word came out with more weight than he had intended, all the weight of months of careful attention and badly concealed noticing, and she heard all of it because she heard everything. She turned toward him fully and looked at him from close enough that he could see the gold ring in her eyes very clearly, and then she did something he had not seen her do before. She brought her hand up and touched the side of his jaw, her palm warm against the cold of his skin, and it was a deliberate touch, unhurried, entirely certain. I have been trying not to do something for approximately 8 weeks, she said. Then stop trying not to, he said. She kissed him. It was not tentative in any way, which was consistent with everything he had learned about her. She committed fully to things she decided to do, no half measures, and it was also, underneath the certainty, the warmest thing he had felt in long enough that the warmth was almost alarming in its scale. He kissed her back with 8 weeks of deliberately misdirected feeling finally given somewhere accurate to go. And the wind came off the fjord and the cold was still cold, but he was not particularly registering it. When they pulled back, she was looking at him with an expression he had not seen before, open in a way she rarely was, something unguarded and certain and very alive in it. There, she said, quietly, satisfied. Yes, he said. There, she laughed. He had not heard her laugh before, a real one, and it was low and genuine, and it made his chest feel too full for the space available. I am going back to the clan seat, she said, and you are going to deal with your lord. Yes, he said. And then, she said, with the strategic directness of someone laying out a campaign plan, you are going to come north. He looked at her. You are certain. Jasper, she said patiently, as though he was being slow about something obvious. I have been certain about you since the 3rd day. He thought about the 3rd day. He had not been certain about himself since the 3rd day. He had been certain about her, but uncertainty about his own worthiness was a comfortable, familiar garment he had been wearing for 2 years, and it did not yield easily. He was aware that she was watching him think this, and he was aware she was seeing it accurately, and he said, I have spent a long time being no one's particular concern. She looked at him steadily. "I know," she said. "You will need to get used to being mine." The word mine, said with that matter-of-fact certainty, did something thorough to him. Not possessive in a cold way, but claiming in the specific way of someone who means to keep what they value and sees no point in being vague about it. He said, "I think I can manage that." She pressed her forehead to his. He did not know the custom. He did not know that among the highland orc clans, this gesture, the pressing of foreheads, called the varek-al, was the deepest expression of recognition that existed in their tradition. Not a kiss, not a formal binding, but something older and more intimate than both, the offering of one mind to another, the saying of "I see you completely and I choose what I see." It was done between mates, between warriors before a final battle, between a mother and child when words had run out. It was not a gesture made lightly, and it was not a gesture made to anyone you did not intend to keep. Jasper did not know any of this. But he felt the weight of it, felt that it was not incidental, that it was something she was doing with intention and meaning, that the steadiness of her forehead against his and the quality of the silence she brought to the moment was specific and significant. So he pressed back, forehead to forehead, closing the remaining inch between them, steady and present and meaning all of it, every word he did not have and everything he was and had been and intended to be. She exhaled, slow and quiet. He could feel it. They stood like that at the wall above the fjord, foreheads pressed together, the wind around them, and something settled in the air between them that was not a word and did not need to be. When they finally stepped back, she was looking at him with an expression of someone who has received an answer they hoped for but did not allow themselves to expect. There was something raw in it, and soft, and completely real. "You pressed back," she said. "Yes. You do not know what that means." "No," he said, "but I meant it." She looked at him for a long, long moment. Then she said quietly, "It means I am yours and you are mine in the old way, completely." She paused. "You should know that before you decide if you meant it." He looked back at her. He thought about 2 years of being no one's, of the empty particular loneliness of that, of the specific warmth of the months since she had arrived and begun systematically dismantling his ability to pretend he did not need anyone. He thought about how she listened, and how she kept what was his, and how she believed him without evidence, and how she laughed low and genuine when she laughed, and how she had kissed him with complete certainty on a cold wall above a fjord. "I meant it," he said. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were very bright. "Then you are going to deal with your lord," she said, "and you are going to come north and you are going to learn to not be someone's particular concern without being alarmed by it." "I will do my best," he said. "Your best," she said, "has been considerable." He left Galdron Hold at the first thaw, when the road south became passable, with a letter from Thane Aldrich testifying to his competent service, and a separate letter from matriarch Shagrol Gorehorn of the Northern Highland clan seat, which was a document that Aldrich had raised his eyebrows at significantly when Vorka handed it over in the great longhouse. The letter from Vorka did not say much in itself, but the clan seat seal and the matriarch's formal address to Lord Haran Venholt said, in the language of political weight that lords understood better than argument, that the matter of Jasper Quinn's alleged conduct was of interest to the Highland Orc territories through their patrol contracts, and that the clan seat would look with considerable favor upon a resolution that established the accurate facts. Vorka had given it to Jasper without ceremony on the morning of her departure, during the brief space between the formal assembly close and the mounting of horses. She had looked at him with her amber eyes for a moment and said, "The letter will open the door. What you do with the door is your own business." "Thank you," he said. "Do not thank me," she said. "Come north." And she had ridden out. The road south was long and cold, and he had a horse Aldrich had lent him and a purpose that was cleaner than anything he had carried in 2 years. He thought about Shagrol for most of the journey, which was not a new development but which was now accompanied by a different quality. Not the frustrated, suppressed noticing of before, but the warm, specific thinking of someone who has an accurate destination and knows how to read a map. Lord Venholt's hold was a walled market town in the foothills south of the highland regions, 4 days' travel from Galdrun, and Jasper arrived on a morning of pale spring sun with Vorka's letter in his coat and his actual sword at his hip, which was the first time he had worn it openly in 2 years. He announced himself at the gate as Jasper Quinn, former knight of Venholt, and was made to wait for an hour, and then admitted to the hall. Venholt was older than he remembered, or rather Jasper was old enough now to see the oldness in him that he had not fully perceived at 23, and the Lord looked at him with the wary calculation of a man assessing liability. Jasper put Vorka's letter on the table. Venholt read it twice. His expression went through several phases. "The Highland clan seat," he said. "Yes, they have an interest in this matter. They do." A pause. "What exactly is it they are interested in?" "Accurate accounting," Jasper said. "As it happens, my lord, so am I. I have had 2 years to think about what happened, and I have come to understand that the person with the most to gain from misassigning the campaign shortfall was the quartermaster Hendren, who has since, I understand, purchased a new property in the river country." He looked at Venholt steadily. "I do not believe you knew the full picture." "I believe Hendren managed the story very effectively. I am prepared to help you find the accurate picture if you are prepared to find it honestly." Venholt looked at the letter. He looked at Jasper. He was a political animal in the way of all lords, which meant the calculation he was running was not about justice but about advantage, and the advantage here, with a clan matriarch seal on the table and the alternative being an investigation that might turn up things that reflected poorly on his own bookkeeping period, was fairly legible. "There is no outstanding charge against you," Venholt said after a long moment. "The record of the inquiry is," he considered his phrasing, "incomplete. As such, it has no standing." It was not an apology. It was not close to an apology. It was a political closure, bloodless and careful, and it was real. The record would be adjusted. His name would be clean. Jasper stood in Venholt's hall and breathed in slowly. He had expected to feel more when this happened, some large emotion. What he felt instead was a simple, clean completion, like setting down something that had been heavy long enough that you had forgotten the weight was optional. "Thank you, my lord," he said, with the correct courtesy and nothing else. He rode north that afternoon. Spring came to the Highland clans in a particular way, with a dramatic abruptness after the long white winter. The snowmelt rushing down the cliff faces into the fjord, and the pines going from black to vivid green in what felt like 3 days. The road north of Galdrun wound up through the pass into clan territory proper, marked by the carved stone posts of the Gorehorn boundary at the summit. And Jasper rode through the boundary on a morning of genuine warmth with mud on his boots, and the travel behind him and the journey ahead very clear. The clan seat of the Gorehorn was 3 days above the boundary, a highland complex of large longhouses, and a central hall built from the same granite as the cliff faces it sat among, with a view of the fjord below that on clear days stretched to the open sea. It was less like a fortress and more like something that had grown from the stone, settled and permanent and serious. And it was full of people, the extended clan, the warriors, the attendants, the trade delegates, the political machinery of a significant regional power, all housed in one complex and operating with the organized complexity of something that had been doing this for generations. Jasper arrived at the gate on the 3rd afternoon and gave his name to the guards, who looked at him with the assessment of people who had been told to expect him and were measuring him against expectation. He was brought through the outer yard and through a series of corridors that were domestic rather than intimidating despite their scale, and then through a door that opened onto a training ground at the complex's east side. Shagrol was there. She was running her warriors through a drilling sequence, the clipped northern dialect signals flowing from her with the ease of long practice, and she heard the door and turned. And when she saw him, her expression did the thing it had done on the fjord wall, something open and warm coming through the professional surface. And she said a single word to Breck, who immediately took over the drill without missing a beat and definitely did not grin, and she crossed the training ground and came to him. She stopped in front of him. She was exactly as he remembered, in her worn dark leathers with the new lacing at the shoulder, her braid over one shoulder, her amber eyes reading him. "You are here," she said. "I am here," he said. "And your lord. The record is cleared, there is no outstanding matter." Something in her exhaled, not worry she had shown him, but worry she had been carrying without showing, and its release was visible. "Good," she said. "Good," he said. "I dealt with my problem. I am told there is still a succession to confirm." "There is," she said. "The clan assembly is in 2 weeks. And you are going to do it, the confirmation." She looked at him steadily. "Yes. I have been running from the seat for 2 years. I am done running." A pause. "Your being here is part of why I am done running." "How so?" "Because I kept telling myself there was nothing here worth coming back to," she said, with the directness that was characteristic and complete. "And then I met someone who taught me, not deliberately and not by saying anything about it, that the actual quality of a life is in whether anyone genuinely knows you in it, and that I was not going to find that on a patrol road." She looked at him. "I found it anyway, on a patrol road." He said, "Shagrol." "Yes. I am going to say something that I am aware sounds like an insufficient response to everything you just said, but I mean it with every part of myself." "Say it," she said. "I am so glad I went north," he said. She looked at him for a beat, and then the real smile came, slow and complete, and it was extraordinary, and he was aware that he would spend considerable time in his life engineering opportunities to see it. She stepped forward and pressed her forehead to his, varek-al the old way, and he pressed back, as he had on the fjord wall, and this time he knew what it meant, and he meant it with that knowledge behind it, and it was a different weight, entirely fuller, and more solid, and more real than the already real first time. "I need to return you to my mother," she said, against his forehead. "She will want to assess whether you are still the same person she thought you were." "I'm not sure I am the same person," he said. "I have done some revision." She pulled back and looked at him with an expression of warm amusement. "Good," she said. "She will like that better." Matriarch Vorka received him in the clan hall, which was the main gathering space of the seat, and she received him with Shagrol at his side, which was apparently a significant positioning, and produced several carefully neutral expressions from the clan elders present. Vorka looked at him for a long moment, the amber eyes that had seen several decades of people trying to manage difficult situations, and then she said, "The Southern Lord." "Resolved," Jasper said. "The record cleared." She nodded once. "And you are here." "I am here. For my daughter." "For myself as well," Jasper said, because precision mattered, "but yes, for Shagrol." Shagrol said nothing beside him, but he could feel the warmth of her arm against his. Vorka said, "The heir of the clan seat has the right of mate choice under the old law. I will not oppose what she chooses." She paused. "I will also say, and this is not a clan matter but a personal one, I believe you are what you appear to be. That is not a small thing. Most people are not." "Thank you," Jasper said. She waved this aside. "The succession assembly is in 14 days. If you intend to be present for it, you will need to learn approximately a great deal about our protocols in that time." "I learn systems quickly," Jasper said. Shagrol said the same, Vorka said, dryly, and concluded the audience. The 14 days were full. He shadowed Shagrol through the complex business of clan succession preparation, which was a thing that involved more documentation and fewer weapons than he had expected. And he learned the Gorehorn protocols with the same approach he had used to learn Shagrol's patrol signals, the logic of them rather than rote memorization, which meant he made fewer errors than expected, and the errors he made were at least interesting ones. He sparred with Breck in the mornings, who had come north with the patrol band, and with 2 of the senior clan warriors who were considerably harder opponents than Breck and did not pull their weight the way Breck did. In the evenings, he and Shagrol walked the outer ramparts of the seat, where the highland spread south toward the fjord below, and the sky came very wide, and they talked the way they had talked at the patrol fire and in the longhouse, which was thoroughly and without performance. She told him about the seat's history, the Gorehorn bloodline and the old debt that sat at its foundation, 3 generations back, a blood oath made by her grandmother to the northern mountain clans that had established the patrol network he had been working within, an oath that the clan seat renewed every generation at the succession assembly. It was not a curse, but it carried the weight of one, the binding obligation of a promise made in blood that could not be released without the consent of both parties, and it was part of why Vorka had pressed the succession question so insistently. The blood oath renewal required the heir to be present and confirmed. If the oath lapses, Shagrol said on the 3rd evening of these walks, the northern mountain clans have the right to contest the patrol territories. It would not become violent immediately, but it would become contested, and contested patrol roads become dangerous roads. And people die on dangerous roads, Jasper said. Yes, she looked at the view. I was not willing to let that happen just because I did not want to come back. It was cowardice what I was doing, calling it freedom. You wanted to know who you were outside of it, Jasper said. She looked at him. How do you do that? She said. What? Say the thing that makes it easier to have been wrong, she said. You do it all the time. It is not flattery. It is not softening. You just find the true version that makes it possible to go forward. He thought about this. I do not know, he said. I have spent a long time thinking about how to be fair about things, including myself. I got it wrong for a while. She reached across and took his hand, her large, warm fingers wrapping around his in the matter-of-fact way she had begun doing a week ago, claiming the contact without ceremony. He had learned to simply take that contact as the gift it was without trying to deserve it first. You are fair, she said. It is one of the things about you. One of the things, he said. What are the others? She looked at him with an expression of warm, dry assessment. You are brave without needing to perform it. You are patient, genuinely, not strategically. You are honest in a way that costs you rather than protects you, which is rarer. She paused. And you are very difficult to grip in a grapple because you understand leverage better than you understand strength, and I have not met many people who do. He laughed. She laughed too, low and real, and the highland evening was wide around them, and the fjord was a dark ribbon far below. He pulled her toward him and kissed her there on the rampart, properly and without the wind making it difficult, and she kissed him back with the same committed certainty she brought to everything. And when they stopped, she rested her forehead to his for a moment before pulling back. Varek-al, she said quietly. Yes, he said. You learn, she said. You are a good teacher, he said. She smiled at him, and he thought he would build his life around that smile, which was a thought he accepted without revision. The succession assembly was held in the main clan hall on a morning of early summer warmth, with the highland clans represented by their senior figures, and the mountain clan representatives present for the blood oath renewal. The hall was full and formal, the air carrying the weight of ceremony, and Shagrol walked through it with the particular quality of someone who has decided to step into a thing they have been avoiding, and is fully committed to the step. Jasper stood in the witness position, which was the place allocated to the heir's chosen companion, beside Breck and 2 of the senior clan warriors who treated him with the straightforward respect of people who had assessed him on the training ground and found him to pass the relevant tests. The succession confirmation was conducted in the northern dialect, which Jasper could not fully follow, but Shagrol had prepared him the evening before with the shape of the ceremony. He watched her stand before her mother and before the gathered clan and speak the old words of the succession oath with the steadiness she brought to all things, and he watched her receive the matriarch's formal acknowledgement and the gathered clan's response, and he watched her become, formally and in the old way, the confirmed heir of the Gorehorn clan seat. When she turned from the dais, her amber eyes found him across the hall immediately. He held her gaze and nodded once, and she nodded back, and it was a small thing and a complete thing. The blood oath renewal came after, the Gorehorn clan and the Northern Mountain clan representatives standing on either side of a common fire and speaking the renewal terms. And it was done formally and thoroughly. The old debt acknowledged and confirmed for the next generation. And when it was concluded, the Mountain Clan senior looked at Shagrol with a respect that was not professional courtesy but genuine, the kind earned through the acknowledgement of difficulty. The assembly meal was long and plentiful, and Jasper navigated the social complexity of it with the help of Breck's quiet commentary and the fact that most of the clan's questions about him were the kind he could answer straightforwardly. By the time the formal occasion resolved into the looser gathering of the meal's later stages, Shagrol had made her way back to him and sat beside him with the ease of someone arriving at their own space. "How was that?" he said. "Necessary," she said. "And good." And over, she looked at him with the open expression she had shown him more frequently in the past weeks. "Thank you for being here. I would not be anywhere else," he said. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said quietly, so that it was only for him, "I want to ask you something." "Ask." In the old law, a confirmed heir takes a partner of equal choosing, not a political arrangement. The partnership is personal first and formal second. She paused. "There is a threshold vow, spoken at the heir's longhouse door, not in ceremony but between two people. It means," she stopped, collected herself. "It means I commit to you as you are and intend to keep you. And you say the same to me." He was very still. His heart was doing something significant. "That is what the varek-al was building toward," she said. "The old way is consistent. Each gesture is a step. The threshold vow is the last one," he said. When she blinked. Whatever she had expected, immediate and direct agreement had not been it, and the surprise in her expression was followed quickly by the particular brightness he had learned to recognize, the thing behind her eyes when she was moved and trying not to show all of it. "When is your preference?" she said carefully. "Now," he said. "Tonight. I have been certain for months, and I do not see the benefit of waiting." She looked at him with those amber eyes, very close and very warm, and said, "Tonight." The heir's longhouse was a separate structure at the complex's northern edge, built into the cliff face partially, dark stone and heavy timber, with a wide wooden threshold step, and a door of old iron-banded oak that had been the heir's door for 3 generations of Gorehorn succession. They came to it at night, when the assembly had wound down and the seat had gone to the quiet of late evening, and they came without ceremony or witness except Vorka, who stood 10 feet back and to the side in the manner of formal witnessing that the old law required and nothing more. The door was closed. The threshold was the threshold. Shagrol turned to him at the threshold, and her amber eyes in the torchlight from the wall sconce were very warm and very steady, and she said the words of the threshold vow in the northern dialect first, which was traditional, and then, for him, in trade tongue. "I take you as you are, Jasper Quinn, knight and blade hand and man of the north now, and I choose what I see in you, and I will not put that choice down." He said, "I take you as you are, Shagrol Gorehorn, warrior and commander and heir of the clan seat, and I choose all of it, and I will not put that choice down." She pressed her forehead to his, varek-al, and he pressed back, and Vorka made the formal acknowledgement sound in the old tradition, and Shagrol kissed him there at the threshold of the heir's longhouse with the warmth and certainty of someone who had been decided for a long time and was finally done waiting. He held her in the torchlight with his arms around her forehead resting against his temple, and felt the specific, thorough peace of a man who has arrived somewhere and knows it. "We should go in," she said after a while. "Yes," he said, "it is cold outside." "It is," he agreed without moving. She laughed, low and real, against his shoulder, and then she took his hand and pulled him across the threshold, and the old iron-banded door closed behind them, and the night was wide and quiet, and the fjord was dark below. The days that followed were new in a way that felt permanent. Jasper settled into the clan seat with the same systematic approach he brought to unfamiliar patrol routes, learning its rhythms and people and obligations not as a visitor or a guest, but as someone who lived there, which he did. and whose life was wound through with Shagrol's in the way of two things that have found their actual alignment. He became the seat's senior blade hand, which was a formal role that Vorka created with the practical efficiency of someone who had assessed the available skill and the existing need, and simply aligned them. He trained the seat's warriors with Shagrol, who remained their commander, and the division of authority was natural and unconflicted, because they thought about combat differently in ways that were complementary rather than competing. He wrote to Thane Aldrich, a proper letter with his real name, which arrived at Galdron Hold and produced a reply from Aldrich that was warm and containing, notably, an invitation for the Galdron Hold to participate in the expanded patrol network that the renewed Blood Oath had opened up. Business and goodwill together, which was the way things worked best. He wrote no letter to Lord Venhold. There was nothing left to say in that direction, and the cleanest version of that chapter was the closed one. The summer came fully to the highlands, long days and short nights, and the pines throwing sharp green shadows across the seat's stone walls, and Jasper learned the northern Orc dialect properly, slowly, spending his evenings practicing vocabulary with Shagrol, who was a good teacher in the mode of someone who found the incorrect versions genuinely funny and said so. "You said," she told him one evening after a pronunciation, "that the fjord is planning to eat your horse. Is that not what I intended?" "You intended to say the fjord water is dangerous in the current season. Those are very similar thoughts," he said. She put her face in her hands and laughed, and he memorized the exact particular shape of that moment. In the late summer, when the assembly season had concluded and the seat had settled into its quieter working rhythms, Shagrol took him to the highest point of the highland above the seat, a broad granite outcropping above the tree line from which the entire fjord country was visible in every direction. She came here when she needed to see clearly, she said, and she brought him for the same reason. They sat at the outcropping's edge with the wind strong around them and the view enormous, and she leaned against his side with the ease of someone who has stopped performing any calculation about whether this is appropriate. "My mother thinks very highly of you," she said. "I know, she told me. She does not tell people that. She tells me her assessments and then presents a neutral face to everyone else. She told me the night before the succession assembly," Jasper said. "She knocked on my door and said, 'You are going to make my daughter's life better.' That is all she said, and then she left." Shagrol was quiet for a moment. "That is the most my mother has ever said," she said. "In terms of words with weight." "I was aware of that," he said. She looked at him. "And what did you think?" "I thought she was right," he said, "and that you were going to make mine better too, and that it would have been strange to say that to your mother." She smiled, looking at the view. "I am going to make your life better," she said. "It is already better." "It is," he agreed. She turned to him, and her amber eyes in the late summer light were the gold-ringed amber he had learned to read as precisely as language, and she pressed her forehead to his in the varek-al, and he pressed back as he always did, as he would always do, with his eyes closed and the wind around them and the fjord very far below, and it was complete. Not a beginning, not a middle, but a thing that had found its right shape and knew it. He was seen completely by someone who chose what she saw. He was chosen by the most extraordinary person he had ever met, chosen not because of anything he performed or any name he carried, but because of what he was, and she wanted him specifically, and she would not put that choice down. He was no longer anyone's nothing. He was Shagrol Gorehorn's, and she was his, and the old way had said so at the threshold of the heir's longhouse, and it would say so again at every forehead pressed to forehead in the varek-al for as long as they both lived, which they both intended to be a very long time. He held her hand at the edge of the granite outcropping with the highland world spread around them, and the evening came warm and long and unhurried, and neither of them was alone anymore, and neither of them would be again.